Mario. I think it's safe to say that's all you really need when you boot up any sort of mainline Mario adventure. Withstanding series takeovers or special one-off games, Mario has rightfully and obviously been the main character of the Super Series from the very beginning. Although, with that constant privilege in the spotlight comes a certain standard to uphold. As the face of an entire genre, he has the duty to be inclusive to everyone who picks up the sticks. From seasoned veterans who are like in their mid-20s to young Timmy's first video game ever. Mario serves as your average gist to the controls. There's nothing special about the way he plays, quite on the contrary actually. He's as vanilla as it gets. Now, I know that sounds lame and lackluster on the surface, but it effectively delivers an instant understanding to the player on how that specific game works. How fast Mario can run and how high he can jump culminates to the overall laws of the game's physics, which in turn correlates to the countless obstacles that you face throughout the journey. You could argue that this is such an obvious observation that holds true for any main character in regards to their own video game. And while there is merit to that, Mario has a special case of longevity that nearly no one else in the industry can match. He's certainly had slight alterations and mix-ups spanning his 30-odd year career, but the relative consistency from his start to the current day is one of his defining qualities. It's difficult to articulate specifically without first introducing rival variables in contrast, but I think there's a unanimous understanding that Mario is the quintessential universal idea on how it feels to control a character in a platforming environment. Or, in way less try-hard video essay lingo, Mario is like a slice of white bread. Plain, albeit reliable. Everybody and their non-celiac diseased grandma loves a good old bread sandwich. We all know exactly how this piece of yeast tastes without having to stick it in our mouths. However, it's only human nature to occasionally want some spice sprinkled on top. Spicy! Unlike his blue-haired contemporary, who often relishes in an ever-expanding cast of playable characters, to the point where you, at times, are subjected to entire genre shifts in gameplay, the Mario series has largely been, well, the Mario series first and foremost. It would be forbidden speech to even remotely hint at a mainline Mario game where he isn't the go-to hero that the entire experience revolves around. This persistence provided throughout the series is wonderful for avoiding the fear of this so-called unnecessary fat some non-main characters may bring alongside them. Yet, as a side effect of this over-familiarity, the brief occasions where Nintendo does allow you to put yourself in the shoes of a non-red overall wearing Italian tends to be some of the most appealing. Now, as deep of a series like Mario stems, I could be talking about this all day if I went through every single game. Luckily for me, on the whole, his 3D outings have been marked by solo campaigns, with an underlying special companion such as Flood or Cappy being these much-needed twists to reinvigorate the formula. I'll be primarily looking over the 2D realm, where there's typically a lot more acceptance for Mario alternatives. So strap in and enjoy the ride of information I got from the Mario Wiki, because there's some good, some bad, and a little of everything in between.
Trash voting.
There's no better place to start than checking in on by far the most common occurrence of a non-Mario playable character, being the green overall wearing Italian, or more properly known as the eternal understudy Luigi. Conveniently and fittingly, let's take it back to his origins, Mario Bros. But a little more super. For all of you Luigi fanboys out in the world, I must preface this by asking you to brace yourself, as sadly his presence in this game isn't helping him beat the infamous Green Mario allegations anytime soon.
Bruh.
He's in large solely used for a necessary player 2 alternative for character choice. A mere palette swap, if you will. That's not exactly what I'd call hitting the floor running, but this may have been for the best. For Bros 1 ushered in a new wave of tight-knit platforming action across its generation. Keeping things grounded with only one style of play ensured that grasping the game was as elementary as possible. Although this benchmark in gaming history is generally more so accredited to only Mario himself, and not so much Luigi. This would unfortunately become a somewhat common reoccurrence for the overlooked brother throughout the rest of his career. For example, I wouldn't put it past you if you flat out forgot that he was even in this game whatsoever, despite him taking half of the real estate from the name of the Mario Brothers. He is, without question, cemented as the embodiment of the phrase Player 2. A reputation that would be built in the coming decades, all stemming from this very moment in time. Without that second NES controller plugged in, Luigi is locked away, never to be seen, thus being destined for an eternal fate of exclusively being played by all the nagging younger siblings of the world, begging for a chance to have their turn. Yeah, the pixels that make up his sprite are a different color, but for the purpose of my main focal point, technically speaking, he is Mario 2. Super Mario Bros. 2. What a great video game. It's probably Luigi's favorite game of all time, if I had to guess. It's up there with his mansion-dwelling spurts as one of the most influential titles that has impacted his character. All because Nintendo said, who needs friends and families having a good time with one another, and completely ditched the multiplayer aspect of the original. In its place are two separate ways to take part in the adventure: Mario game and Luigi game. Hopefully, it wouldn't take a Mr. YouTube guy for you to understand the general gist of what these are. Concerning the Mario game, here's that consistency of Mario coming in at full effect. Jumping from one entry in a series to the next can bring forth some concerns, but not to fret, as outside of minor gameplay tweaks, you are controlling Mario here just as he was in Bros 1. The way he plays by this point has been instinctively built up and ingrained into your muscle memory, therefore providing a sense of safety for these returning players exploring the unknown in this tough as nails sequel. That certain expectation of feeling you're looking for is met. This is how things should be. Well, you can keep all of that coziness to yourselves while I jump headfirst into Luigi game. No longer caged down with the crusty Player 2 controllers of the world, Luigi has been thrusted upwards onto an equal standing with his older brother. He's now his own standalone character. It's the same game, sure, but by selecting Luigi, you're introduced to a brand new perspective. A distinctive gameplay style that differentiates him from Mario awaits you. This is the birth of the legendary Luigi physics. Relative to the red mustache man, he jumps higher while suffering from slippery traction. Oh, probably just sounds like some small and basic changes. Yeah, I hear ya. But you must remember that the scope of Mario Bros. Is that of easy to comprehend, which in turn, the act of changing up character attributes can alter the way one experiences the same material in fun new ways. Do be warned though, Luigi is a lot trickier than those few differences may lead you to believe. His slickness on the ground and impressive hops makes him a bit of a loose, unruly beast, compared to the other hand, secure Mario. You have to have a constant awareness of his statistical pros and cons in relation to your surroundings. You can't 100% play the exact same way as you would with his brother, meaning that new methods and routes are opened up if you're willing to dabble into the Luigi side. The very act of having multiple unique characters means there's an inherent nuance added to the game by demanding a stylistic choice from the player. Instead of mindlessly popping in the cartridge and clicking "let's a go," you have to actively decipher whether you're in a Mario or Luigi kind of mood. Furthermore, reaching past purely gameplay benefits, these simple changes brought forth a much needed sense of validity into Luigi. He graduated from a measly clone to his own person, and this wasn't only a net positive for Luigi himself either, as by strengthening his image, you uplift the dynamic of the Mario brothers as a pair. The days of people mistaking him for Mario's identical brother only with a slightly different wardrobe were over. No, Luigi's identity is made crystal clear here. He is one slippery son of a gun, which, I don't know about you, sounds a whole heck of a lot better than Green Mario. Which is what he was demoted straight back to in Mario Bros. 3. Man. Thrown back into the Player 2 jail cell, we wallow away our remaining days until death vanquishes us from this earth.
Isn't there like another Mario 2 I could talk about or something?
Holy guacamole, I don't care what this game originally was, Doki Doki, the Flintstones, Mega Man 3, whatever. The fact of the matter is, it's boasting a star-studded cast of 4 individual characters, each with their own special attributes and stats. To give you a not-so-quick rundown, of course, without a doubt, leading the pack is Mario, Mr. Average. It doesn't matter what situation you throw at him, he'll make it out just a-okay. A perfect selection if you're braving into a unfamiliar landscape and want a straightforward time, leaving any drawbacks at the door. You're probably afraid of taking risks by choosing him, but still picking Mario when there's other options is fairly Chad if I do say so myself. And hey, you can't have Mario without Luigi, unless you're Mario 64 Sunshine. If you were any worried that the greatly established version of this green goofball from the Lost Levels wouldn't stick around, well, don't you sweat a drop. At least for now, this man has the hops, scuttling around with every leap. This dude is for all of you dudes who just like to mash the jump button 24/7. Who knows, by doing so, you may very well end up finding a shortcut or two throughout the levels. Some caution is in order though, because he's as glizzed up as ever. I mean, he's harder to control in midair because of his big jumps. Next up, going from giving you the finger to giving you a hand on your quest, we have Toad. Toad is, well, how the kids would say,
fast as fuck, boy.
He can absolutely zoom past levels flying across the ground at top speeds, which is where he definitely should stay. Not to body shame whatsoever, but he has these little stubs for legs, meaning that his jumping prowess is near non-existent. Thank golly for super jumps because you'll need them, trust me. Honestly, Toad is a personal favorite of mine as it's exhilarating trying to be a speedster while narrowly avoiding death from your pathetic little jumps. Last but not least, we have Princess Toadstool. Okay, so if you didn't know any better and picked her after playing the other characters, you would think that the devs made her as some practical joke. She's slow as molasses, can't jump that high, and has the arm strength of 2 corn dog sticks glued together, bar none having the worst stats in the game. But you'd be quick to notice a little something special about her. She has a few seconds of extra hang time in the air with her float ability. If you absolutely stank at precision platforming and don't mind taking things a bit slower, then she'll come in super duper handy. And even if you are a god gamer, it just feels so satisfying to breeze above enemies and obstacles with that brief extended airtime. Alas, as cool as this ability is, I personally can't shake off the trade-offs of her Duke stats that prevent her from being the clear best character. Plus, to me, her float is a bit of a constant temptation to bypass the need to think critically about the consequences of every jump you do. Sure, it's not a get out of free jail card every time, but it takes away the satisfaction of making tight jumps that the other three would be forced to do. So in a weird way, Peach is just too good, but also too bad at the same time. All of that said though, she is still pretty dang awesome. I just want to take a moment to make sure that we are really appreciating what we have here, because it's actually quite insane how much of an all-star vibrance this cast brings alongside them. All three of these non-Marios would eventually land their own star roles to carry on that main character energy. And here they are, all teamed up in one package. I mean, it's not every day you get a platformer with such a large handful of dynamic characters to hand select from. Boiling them down to their essence, we see how they more or less act as alternate versions of Mario's base abilities. Answering the questions of, what if he had a higher jump? Luigi. What if he was much quicker? Toad. What if he had a unique platforming move? Peach. Thus, the most important takeaway is that by playing as someone other than Mario, you're not suddenly in a completely different realm. Rather, just a slight change up from the norm that still delivers fun action across the entirety of the game. In fact, stepping back to look at this entire cast and the sheer range of variety within it, we can start to see the downsides of playing as the man made of vanilla when you have such alluring flavors such as Luigi Pistachio, Toad Sherbet, and Peach. But hey, there's nothing wrong with liking vanilla above all else. You may find that Luigi's slipperiness is irksome, or Toad's low jump makes for an unnecessary hurdle, or the slowness of Peach is too boring. To become different while keeping a sense of interest about yourself means that there are advantages and disadvantages to be had. If anything out of the norm bugs you, then Mario is without a doubt your best option. His weakness of being plain turns out to be his biggest strength. By allowing new perspectives via alternative character choice, Mario ironically becomes that much more desirable. That is what makes him so fun to me. A chance to go back to normality after experimentation is always there, but that's entirely up to you and you alone to choose. And don't be afraid to make any sort of choice, as you don't have to sign over your allegiance for any one particular character. If Toad is your soul animal, or person, thing, and you couldn't help but immediately choose him out the gates, then awesome, go for it. But if soon after you realize it's not going to work out so swell, then just wait until the next level or a continue to hop on over to any of the other three, waiting to get their chance to shine. Perhaps it is this power of choice given to the player that impresses me the most when looking back at Mario Bros. 2. The freedom it bestows to have a real feeling of individuality by letting you select a style that suits you the best. These surface level minute differences between the cast's attributes such as speed, jumping, and turnip lifting power are enough to make you have preferences over certain choices. We had a glimpse of this aspect within Lost Levels Luigi, but here it's pushed to the absolute maximum forefront. Mario is fantastic as always, but it never hurts to have a couple of friends by your side along for the ride. In conclusion, this might be the greatest video game of all time. I'm just saying. Looking at this version of Mario Bros. 2 in relation to the rest of the NES bunch, I think I can solidly present a pattern going about. It seems that whenever there's an option for multiplayer, Bros 1 and 3, the devs opt back to Green Mario for a player 2 Luigi. But when it's strictly a solo man's adventure, both versions of Bros 2, there's a lot more room for experimentation with the playable characters. I suppose this approach is acceptable if you're wanting both player 1 and 2 to have an equal experience throughout the game. It's just that the offset of such design is the unfortunate absence of the fun of player expression and replay value. Sure, Mario Bros. 1 can get a pass. Any critique I throw at it is covered under the first entry in series nullification clause. It's more so Mario Bros. 3 that I'm disappointed in, since it's the first case of of reverting Luigi back into a Mario clone, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. This precedent set for my proposed pattern follows suit into the Super Nintendo blockbuster real best game of all time, Super Mario World. But Luigi's tale in this particular game is a journey filled with ups and downs through space and time. Released in 1990/91 for Japan and North America respectively, Mario World again features a multiplayer option for two people to romp through Dino Land together. Of course, in-game, these being Mario and his green doppelganger. I know I've been throwing around the phrase green Mario left and right so far, in which a large part of that stems from Luigi's sprites being a simple color swap from Mario. It's no different here, but I like to point out how especially weird this makes Luigi look in this game. Notably his getting hit into dying sprite, where his forehead and tongue are green, making him look more sick than in pain. It's fine with Mario because he turns red like any normal person would when they fall into lava, so yeah, Luigi's just a weirdo, dog. Anyways, yeah, he's a clone. Disappointing, but case closed, right? Well, not so fast. It gets a little funky with the first re-release of Mario World in late 1994 that was a part of the re-release of Mario All-Stars, which in of itself is a 16-bit upgraded re-release of the NES Mario classics. Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World. Wow, what a deal and what a mouthful. One of the only major differences in this version is that Luigi was ever so graciously given an all-new sprite set. For someone who grew up exclusively with the original version of Mario World, I gotta say, seeing Luigi any other way feels a bit cursed. But in all honesty, the sheer amount of personality that is radiating off this new look makes him feel like a brand new character, despite still being a recycled Mario under the hood. The goofiness levels are off the chart with the way he jumps, slides down slopes, having a humongous head while in a small form, and pretty much everything he does being so silly. All of this just gives Luigi so much more life compared to his mere palette swap job beforehand. And he's even still prone to some weirdness with him kinda thrusting out fireballs as if he's in severe pain by doing so.
It burns when I pee!
I've hammered in that it's important to distinguish yourself mechanically, and that is still the case, but here is a great example of ways to trick the player into feeling a sense of freshness when picking up and controlling a not-so-new character. Sure, Luigi was in the original release of Mario Worlds, but in all actuality, no, he was finally added here in All-Stars. Another useless fun fact: this version of All-Stars was never released in Japan. So that means Japanese gamers never knew this version of Luigi living his best life. Until, of course, the GBA enhanced but also dehanced port of Super Mario World, Super Mario Advance 2. And you thought the last game had an annoying title. When introducing this bona fide gem to an all-new generation, there was a newfound chance to rectify what should have been done years ago, adding Luigi physics to Luigi. And hey, look at that, he's got them here. Not to sound like I know it all, but this further concretes my pattern from earlier, as Advance 2 nullifies the multiplayer in the main story mode. And as a result, we have a swappable, playable Luigi at any point. I absolutely love how he's always there by your side, ready to jump into the action if you so let him. It truly feels as though this is a quest for the Mario brothers and not just Mario. Concerning the way he plays, you have your classic Luigi stuff, all cool, but the differences between the bros goes a bit deeper than base character qualities. Your main two power-ups within World, the Fire Flower and Cape Feather, slightly alter depending on your character choice. Luigi's fireballs bounce a bit higher than Mario, Mario's, and his flying skills are slower, but it allows him to pick up more of an incline. There's also a few cool oddities like being able to hold certain enemies in Yoshi's mouth and spit them back out as projectiles, whereas Mario's Yoshi would go ahead and swallow them. Even something like hitting a multiple filled coin block is different with Luigi, exposing the entire load at once with a single tap. Character-specific attributes are one thing, but modifying how outside factors like power-ups and whatnot function is such a massively cool idea that I wish they played around with more outside of this game. If you can stand the oversaturated graphics, slight screen crunch, and abysmal sound quality that's so bad that it's sorta charming, then I highly recommend trying out this version of Super Luigi World. You will not be disappointed, but if you are, I don't care.
Do the Mario, swing your arms from side to side. Come on, it's time to go. Do the Mario, take one step, and then again, let's do the Mario.
Pretty much from this point onwards, around the late 90s, Mario would take a bit of a detour to jumpstart his 3D career while leaving his 2D roots behind. Fans of his more traditional outings would have to suffice with the aforementioned slightly watered down ports of the older games through the GBA's Advanced series. Classics on the Go was neat, but for those yearning for an all-new experience, don't you worry, as you'd only have to wait about 14 years for a proper reboot. Yeah, it really was that long. The new Soup series would be the new heir to Mario's wacky side-scrolling shenanigans with a whopping 5-ish games that really stretched out the usage of the word new. There are some good things about these games, some bad things, and there's even more bad things. The playable casts are certainly the latter. Not to show my hand right out the gate, but if I'm being fully transparent, these games were the main inspiration for this video. It's just that I got a little too wrapped up talking about everything up until now, but don't let that fool you. The new Super Mario Bros. Series has the true character crisis here. Now, to start things off easy, the handheld entries don't hold much interest as they play things fairly by the books. It does have various multiplayer options, but in regards to the main meat of the platforming, you're going at it solo. New DS in particular doesn't cut the cheese and gets straight into it with the Mario game throwing you into the action. Now, with DS being the first new Soup entry, it does a splendid job with returning to the bare-bone basics of the franchise, just with a hint of modern twang added alongside it. Even with blending in some of his 3D moves, Mario still has that rock-hard, easy-to-understand foundation that has been ever-expanding over decades of on-the-job experience. Tackling all the new material the game offers is a blast with this go-to fella. But as for anyone else, well, those more observant may be scratching their heads asking where Luigi is. We can see him on the cover and the cartridge sticker, so what's the dealio, man? Hold your horses, you rapscallions. Just hold down L and R while selecting your file to turn this Mario game into a Luigi game. Don't let those Lost Levels vibes fool you, as he's nothing too special. Taking the series back to its roots also meant giving Luigi his "You're Mario, but green" badge back. Although, instead of an identical sprite with a palette swap, he can now have his own model. How lucky and grateful he should be. Let me stop with the disappointing act though, as I'm sure finding out about this little trick through either playground rumors, game facts, or those cheesy cheat code books from the book fair made you feel a little warm and gooey inside. I mean, it's Luigi. The charm of playing as him in a sort of Easter egg sense is something I can't be too salty about. New Soup 2, on the other hand, that one just rustles my jimmies to the core. Basically, it's the same hold down a button code mode for Luigi circumstances as DS. But now, instead of it always being available from the start, you have to actually beat the game to unlock him. Except most other games give you a quick notification when you do unlock something, and I think we missed the memo here. In New DS, if you had no friends, internet, and were homeschooled, you could at least find out about the Luigi code via the very tail end of the credits where they sneak it in. New 2's story mode both gatekeeps the code until after you beat it while also not telling you about it. Oh, sorry man. This wouldn't be so bad if he had any merit to be played with outside of you being Luigi's #1 fan, in which, no he doesn't. This is totally unrelated, but Super Mario 3D Land, the 3DS's third dimensional Mario game, has you unlocking Luigi soon after the main adventure is beaten. He'll never have Luigi physics though.
Hey, yo!
The lesson to learn here? Man, Luigi's redesigned Tanuki suit looks really weird, and also New Mario 2 is bad. Not quite as bad as New Super Mario Bros. Wii though. God, I really don't like this game pretty much at all if I'm keeping it real. To put it in the most poetic way possible, it's like the Burger King of Mario games. And that's all I'll say about that. As much flack as I have and will give it throughout my YouTube career, it cannot go unnoticed the ambition driving New Wii's introduction of simultaneous 4-player multiplayer. I know this game is kinda ancient by now, but this was a big deal. Miyamoto had expressed a desire for this type of experience in a Mario game for quite some time by this point, and it was cool to see it come into fruition. Fairly overdue, to be frank. I'm not necessarily here to discuss whether or not it was implemented or designed well. It was not, but rather the fact that the devs were forced to include at least 4 separate characters to appease this structure. Sure, we've seen this large of a cast with Mario Bros. 2 USA, but you could argue that was only because of its foreign origins. And outside of that, we've really only seen the occasional Luigi marked as player 2. But now, we suddenly have 4 Scrimblows to introduce. Mario and Luigi should be obvious givens by this point, but joining them are Toad and Toad. No, sorry, excuse me. Yellow Toad and Blue Toad. What in the ever-loving barnacles is this? I get that they wanted to keep the status quo of Peach being kidnapped so they wouldn't have to think outside the box for the story, but come on, 2 random Toads was the best they could come up with? Now, don't get me wrong, Toad, he's super cool, quite a swell individual in fact. That is just 1 Toad. 2 Toads ain't so swell. Although, I would be lying if I didn't mention how freaking cool their triple jump flip animation thingy is. So props for that, man. This is a particularly subjective manner, but this lineup feels like the most absolute filler and uninspired cast I've ever seen. That is, assuming you had the chance to actually see the full cast. Because if you happen to be a loner and try playing as your favorite character of all time, Yellow Toad, then sorry, but you can't. A solo romp through the game locks you into Mario only. And not only that, but if you somehow did have friends and family to play with, player 1 is still locked into Mario for whatever reason. Yeah, I know you can easily swap the controllers around, but regardless, it's the principle that counts. Nonetheless, what a shockingly silly tease thrown onto you, despite there being no issues with just swapping Mario out with Luigi or the Toad Bros. We've seen plenty of cases around player port character gatekeeping, but you would think by this point in time, you'd be given full flexible freedom. I don't know, maybe they themselves were also ashamed of sticking in 2 Toads in place of almost anybody else. If only there were two other characters that have a similar build and characteristics to the Mario Bros. I don't know, maybe something like the Miis? Look, I'm not even a huge playable Mii guy myself. I mean, if you main them in Smash or Mario Kart, you are indeed lame, but wow, really? The Miis seem to be a central marketing ploy for the Wii, with an entire catalog of Mii-centric software and special appearances. The prospect of being able to virtually insert yourself into a Mario game as the main star just felt like a no-brainer move. I could just imagine the trailers so vividly in my head. Like the parents walk into their child playing on the Wii and they say, "Oh, Johnny, it's time for bed," but then they're all like, "No, Mom, I can't. It's up to me to save the princess." And then it shows in-game footage of a Mii of the child fighting Bowser or something. Just genius, right? Well, someone at Nintendo must have caught the same brain blast as I, because they went on to make New Super Mario Bros. Mii. No, not New Wii, New Mii. If you've never heard of this, I don't blame you, as it's not so much of a standalone game, but rather a mere tech demo for the Wii U to showcase the gamepad's off-screen capabilities. Based on New Wii, there's a handful of newly created levels to goof off in. However, as the name may imply, in addition to the main cast of New Wii, ongoers would be able to play as their very own Mii. Or, I guess, whatever Miis they had on the demo, I suppose. And hey, look at that. The Miis even dress up in festive little Mario-esque overalls. And depending on your player port, you can sport the outfit of Mario, Luigi, Wario, and Blue. As you could probably imagine, this demo would serve as the basis of the Wii U's New Soup entry, creatively named New Super Mario Bros. U, with many of the demo's levels being retooled into actual stages for its release. Something that was not retooled, though, were the Miis.
Let me be clear.
Not to make you think you have some sort of false memories floating around though, as technically the Miis are playable in New U, but they're relegated straight into the side modes of the game, your missions, coin battles, and boost rush. They, for some reason, weren't allowed to participate in the main story. The reasoning? Probably because they sound exactly like Pac-Man from that weird sequel thing. It's really strange. And if I'm not the first person to make that comparison, I'm gonna be a wee bit peeved. Nah, I'm just joshing around. Why, it's of course to make room for the real stars of the show. Mario, Luigi, Yellow Toad, and Blue Toad. Somehow, these guys aren't that much more appealing the second time around. Yeesh. I'm not asking for the world here, guys, but something a little more creatively juiced than a repeat of a reused character model with a color change for the second time in a row would be appreciated. These two are single-handedly taking the spirit of Green Mario to new heights. With how much pizzazz went into every single OG Mario adventure, that made each entry completely stand out from one another, with maybe the exception of the lost levels, it'll give you a tremendous case of whiplash looking across to the new series, in which they all kinda blend together in your mind. This battle of style from the new versus old generations encompasses much more than solely the playable cast, but having the same exact dry and uninspired faces across multiple games does it no favors. There's a reason why every single video essay about these games has the tagline of "What's new is old," or something similar. And that's no jab at the creators, since that phrase both kinda goes hard and represents the new game's legacy quite well. It's perfectly fine to reuse tools and assets from your previous works, of course. But if there's nothing new added to the mix, then it runs the risk of coming off as especially uninspired and tired out. The plainness of these toads handhelds and new Wii were presented as a plate of slightly above room temperature cheese. All around unpleasant and undesirable. Their return in new U is presented as the same exact cheese, except now that it's sat out for even longer, it's turned moldy and straight up disgusting. In other words, they perfectly symbolize the gameplay attributes that they and everyone else is equipped with. If the handheld New Soup game's lack of regard for poor Luigi is anything to base the console entries on, you'll at least be adequately prepared for the oncoming disappointments. Mario, Luigi, Toad 1, or Toad 2. No matter who picks who, you'll all be controlling virtually the same character. Not a single new game thus far has anything outside of Mario physics to offer. To be clear, this isn't some sort of automatic deal breaker for the game's quality, as that would be a bit overdramatic, and I realize that the point I'm making has been beaten to a bloody pulp by now. But to wrap your head around this sheer amount of mediocrity and why I'm stressing it so much, let me bring up the case study of, and I can't believe I'd ever be using this game to grandstand a positive point, Super Mario 3D World, the Wii U's third-dimensional counterpart to New U. This game is a bit of a standout from the previous lineage of console 3D Marios, as many of its elements are more akin to that of a classic 2D title. So it's to no wonder that this would mark the first implementation of a real-time four-person multiplayer in a 3D Mario space. Which, again, I'm not here to discuss the questionable practicality of the feature, but rather the fact it can and should be fair to compare what it brings to the table in contrast to the home console New Soup games. One aspect that'll nearly instantly catch your eye is the, wouldn't you guess it, playable characters. You may even shed a single nostalgic-based tear looking at a near replica of Mario 2 USA's cast an entire 25 years later. Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Toad, and yes, that is singular mind you, all running around together in their own special ways. Mario's normal, Luigi jumps, Toad runs, and Peach floats. The gang's back together and all is well in the world. What's more is that following in Bros 2 USA's footsteps of freedom is that you're not even limited to just Mario for solo play. The liberty of experimentation is even greater than before, with swapping between the cast being an absolute breeze. There's even this little random button to give you and your friends a delightful surprise when entering into each progressing level, otherwise known as Who's Getting Stuck with Peach. With all of that in your mind, hopefully my rampage against the new series is starting to become more clear, as they don't have much of a leg to stand on by this point. Them utilizing the same exact story beats from game to game to game looks foolish in comparison to 3D World's break from the mundane normality of Peach's capturement. And it's not as if she got 2D'd either. Nope, she happens to be a valuable asset in more ways than just a token to collect at the end of your troubles. The old retro excuse of wanting every player in a multiplayer setting to have an equal plate has suddenly vanished. Here in 3D World, not a single person will be the same. Yeah, this can be a little irksome if two people end up fighting over being, say, Luigi, but I think many would agree that having differences between players adds to the dynamic and flavor of the shared experience. It's an element that I definitely tend to take for granted, only to realize what I had when swapping back to the drag of the New Soup series. Now, take a moment to imagine an alternate reality in which 3D World's characters had none of their own personality and unique traits about them. Ask yourself just how much blander would the experience instantly become if Peach played the same as Mario? Mario, or if Toad played the same as Luigi. This change may not affect some of reviews, and it certainly doesn't impact the core backbone of the level design, but for others, I hope this what-if scenario would be a dire detriment to the game. It would totally undermine the value of having these extremely distinct and lovable characters. Sure, cosmetic variance that suits to your liking is important, but from a mechanical viewpoint, copying and pasting Mario's data 3 times means you might as well just have 4 separate Marios as the cast. Or, another way to phrase that, a Mario, Luigi, Yellow Toad, and Blue Toad. Now, this isn't to imply that I want every Mario game to have Bros 2 or 3D World's cast. All I want is to see the creative juices flowing from the devs, something, you know, new. I can already feel it, so all of you New Soup series defenders, calm down for a second, as I'm sure you're all dying to unleash the one. Oh, but wait, what about this? Kart, the new series, has under its sleeve. It took an entire year dedicated to the old chap, but Luigi finally got his rightful dues in his very own campaign takeover of New Super Mario Bros. U, turning it into New Super Luigi U. With Mario out of the picture for the first time ever, not counting this or any of that, Luigi finally has his time to shine. It's a fun game, one of the best in the series, no doubt. But the real question arising is just who would fill in that 4th character slot? Would they bring in a 3rd Toad? Haha, of course not, that would be so silly of them. Nah, we got the purple rabbit named Nabbit, one of, if not the coolest modernly created characters in the franchise. If he feels a little familiar, then I commend your brain juices, since he actually made his debut in New Mario U as a thief who'd occasionally pester you. But don't worry, he's turned his life around and now is your friend. Kinda. One drastic gameplay change from Nabbit is his inability to use normal power-ups, instead converting them into 1-ups at the end of every level. Pretty suckish, right? Well, that only means that he has to have some sort of unique ability to compensate for this drawback, much in the same vein as Peach's floating. And with him always carrying his sack around, you would think that maybe he could pick up enemies and store them to use as a projectile, sorta like Yoshi. Now that would be neat. Oh, no, he just can't take damage from enemies, phasing right through them like he's on some Danny Phantom type beat. This honestly isn't the most surprising thing in the world, as I'm sure the devs wanted to offer an easier method of play, since one of New Luigi U's defining aspects is its difficulty relative to New Mario U. This can be proven further by the option of a solo player, who normally would be locked to only Luigi, to hold down a button combination in order to enter any level as Nabbit. He's still susceptible to dying from any means of instant death such as lava or being squished, but in general, he can fly through levels with minimal effort or worry. Again, think of Bros 2's Toad and his gameplay perks, just without any of the risk involved. The way Nabbit was implemented is sort of a touchy subject that I'm going to hold off on for the time being, but just know that it's an interesting design choice that does have its ramifications. On the other hand, purely speaking cosmetically, this is already a humongous step in the right direction. I will say, it's sorta weird to declare that it's the best new series casting call thus far, since there's no Mario and the 2 Toad Bros are still here. 1 step forward, 2 steps back, I suppose. Now, Nabbit technically wouldn't be the only new playable character we have on our hands, as I'd be remiss to not mention probably one of the most random turns of events of the evening. If you thought that the Miis were out for the count, then you have another thing coming. Upon collecting every single star coin across the whole game, you'll unlock the final Star Road level, Flying Squirrel Ovation. This auto-scroller is an odd outlier, as you actually do need the squirrel suit to avoid every video game character's worst nightmare, the screen's cutoff points, which for our no power scrub-loving friend Nabbit may be too much to handle. Well, those clever devs thought ahead and had a solution put in place. Weirdly enough, instead of kicking you back over to Luigi like you'd probably imagine, you instead get to play as your Mii. Yep, they finally got their time to shine in the main meat of the story mode, for exactly one level that a vast majority of players didn't reach. Nice. New character choices aside, something of bigger note here is that Luigi finally got his Luigi physics back in all of their glory. It only took them 5 whole games, but he's back in action. High jumps, scuttling around while slipping and sliding in good old Ouija fashion. It's oddly a bit surreal to finally get a chance to dip into something new in terms of character attributes after going through 4 separate new games. Dubiously enough though, it's not only Luigi who was given these mechanics. The Toad Bros and Nabbit also have these high jumps and sticks of butter for feet. You know how that famous saying goes, if everyone has Luigi physics, then no one has Luigi physics. Or something like that. In an odd twist, Luigi becomes Mario in a sense, the new standard for how the game should be understood. The very uniqueness that distinguished Luigi from a gameplay perspective is now commonplace amongst everyone. It's not to the same effect as Mario's dominance, since it's only this one game, and trust me, I don't want to sound like a spoiled child who's ungrateful for what they received. It's merely something to note, is all. And for what it's worth, new Luigi U finally did some good for the overall new series. So I do have to give some applause for that, just not that much. Years later, with the successful release of Nintendo's next home console, they thought it'd be a good idea to not let Wii U classics die on that trash heap and ported nearly everything over to the Switch. New Super Mario Bros. U would be no exception, with it being bundled together with the new Luigi U DLC as one package under a deluxe title. Despite most consumers having no prior experience of the original game upon purchase, there was still an unspoken rule that there had to be at least some amount of fresh material for the 13 people who actually did own the Wii U. And not to mention the fact that the game was nearing 6 years old by this point. While Deluxe isn't a top runner for best Wii U ports in terms of this added content, I should be absolutely thrilled as one of the few new things that was added is concerning the playable cast. Although, even though Donkey Kong's nowhere to be seen, I still feel the presence of a monkey's paw looming about. To start things off, a complete godsend of a feature that I have no idea why it took them this freaking long to implement is the choice for player 1 to select any character outside of the main star. Swapping between everyone is as easy as pausing on the overworld map. Hallelujah! As someone who usually plays these games by their lonesome, what a genuinely great change. To which I unironically chose Yellow Toad to start with, so maybe I'm just a huge hypocrite here. Okay, going into more character specifics, that man Nabbit makes his return as a part of the standardized cast, no longer being a new Luigi U exclusive. Also joining the ranks this go around is Toadette of all people. She's certainly not my first choice for a new character, but I don't think beggars can be choosers at this point. So, across Deluxe, that comes up to a whopping total of 5 unique characters. If you're thinking to yourself, wait, shouldn't it add up to 6? Well, the Toad Bros have been combined into a single character slot. In fact, for the longest time, I thought that Blue Toad was straight up axed off, but nah, he's still kicking around. And not to sound petty, but it seems like combining the yellow and blue Toads into the same character didn't cause any issues. Funny how that works. Without a shadow of a doubt, the casting call here is among the best in the entire Mario series. So why am I still not that happy about it? Oh, the curse of thinking critically about the media you consume. What a tragedy. You should notice while hovering over Toadette and Nabbit on the character selection screen, the text of easier and easiest, respectively, pops up over their icons. What exactly does this mean? Well, you could say that these two have certain advantages over the rest of the cast. Nabbit's abilities shouldn't be too foreign as they are carried over straight from New Luigi. The whole can't be hurt by enemies thing. Plus, with a few additions like enhanced swimming controls, no slippery traction on ice, and more time for the level clock. Toadette isn't quite as busted with only receiving the control perks and time bonus while still being susceptible to normal enemy attacks. Hence the easier and easiest distinction. However, she does have exclusive access to the Super Crown. This fairly infamous power-up turns Toadette into Peachette for some reason.
You ever get the feeling something really bad is about to happen?
All the memes aside, I honestly do not know how to fully feel about Peachette. It's like they wanted the best of both worlds of having a playable Peach in some form, while also keeping her kidnapped for the sake of maintaining the same new Mario/Luigi U stories. But you obviously couldn't have both at the same time, so here's the compromise. The better solution, in my opinion, would have been to just throw Daisy a bone after 30 years, but working with what's present, I see it as a tad bit problematic. On one hand, seeing a pseudo-redesigned Peach is neato, if you ignore her soulless eyes, that is, but on the other hand, it kinda cuts down on Toadette's presence. It's true that Peachette is only active with a Super Crown, but they're not a rare resource across the games, as it's Toadette's main power-up and defining feature to earn her easier title. So you'll be seeing your fair share of Peachette whether you like it or not. Concerning the actual abilities of the Super Crown, it's basically a modified flying squirrel suit. The initial trajectory you take from your quick burst of upwards movement is a lot straighter, but you do lose the slower descent afterwards, instead having it pre-burst to mimic Peach's old school floating more so than the regular squirrel's more jerky movement. One thing you do miss out on is the handy tech of clinging onto walls. However, in return, you do get a quick pick-me-up when falling into pits. How ever so convenient. Don't get it twisted, I think having more accessibility through easing the playing field for those less skilled is perfectly fine. While I subscribe to the buckle down and try harder method when your skill isn't cutting it, it would be quite obtuse of me to ignore that a lot of people just pick up a controller to join their friend or family member for a quick round of Mario fun, so it's not that deep. Although, what does go deep under my skin is the utter lack of options and customization. These attributes awarded to Toadette and Nabbit are non-refundable. If you want to play as either one of these easy mode characters without being handed charity, then you are simply out of luck. Again, there's no shame if you prefer these settings to enjoy the game. You do you, but I find it downright despicable the way they implemented it. For Nabbit's case, he was introduced as a necessity for an easier time through Luigi U, a notably tougher game. But now here in the much easier game of New Mario U, he's slapped with the same exact easy mode settings, thus branding him with those attributes the entire time. I genuinely wanted to play as Nabbit during my playthrough of both deluxe titles. He's a rad character, but I never once did due to his gameplay style taking away a large sense of danger that I get satisfaction from overcoming. And while I wasn't as tempted to try out Toadette, the same message still applies to her. I know that they aren't supposed to appeal specifically to someone like me, but I think a simple option to apply or take away these easier settings to not only Toadette and Nabbit, but with every character in the cast would have provided the best of both worlds. I mean, what if you're playing with 3 people who've never touched a video game before? Only one of them can have an easier time with Nabbit, and I guess another one can try their hand with Toadette, but the third person is is just thrown back into the wolf's den. And for the complete opposite example, what if you and all 3 of your buddies are complete sweaty tryhards? Sorry, you're a bit out of luck, as one of you has to take the helm of one of the Baby Man easy characters. That is, if you're playing the new Mario U portion of Deluxe, as if you're playing Luigi's campaign, then the absence of Mario means that 2 out of the 4 players have to be given a handicap in some manner. Overall, it's an odd display of mandatory, albeit selective accessibility. Up until this point, I've laid out the facts of what new stuff Deluxe has brought to the table with only a whiff of my opinion here and there. But if I'm being brutally honest, I would say that these 2 crustaceans aren't that new whatsoever. Instead of being in the realm of an interesting alternative playstyle to Mario, they are just straight up a better Mario. It's unlike within USA's cast, where everyone has their own strengths, but they also carry their own weaknesses. Imagine how boring it would be if you could play as a Toad who has the same exact stats as Mario, but he's just way faster. Why the heck would you ever want to play as Mario when an objectively better character in both a casual and competitive viewpoints is right there on the selection screen beside him? There's no sense of push and pull with that kind of setup. But because in reality, Toad can't jump as well as Mario and the others, he has a sense of duality to him that you must weigh the pros and cons of before making your decision. This is interesting design to me, and with all due respect to accessibility, Toadette and Nabbit are just not interesting to me. There's no compromises to be made, they're just flat out beginner characters. Which, yeah, is cool and all, but these little gremlins are the only newly added slots on this boring old cast. Keep in mind that Luigi and Toad are still virtually the same as they were beforehand. Their appearance, animations, gameplay, it's all regurgitated, and as harsh as it may sound, I think that's the perfect word to sum up all of this bootiness. It's just that I can't help but feel a little jealous when I peep over to the room next door and see someone playing 3D World while enjoying a more properly newly introduced playable character, Rosalina. First things first, I want to give some appreciation towards 3D World for not giving you a cool unlockable bonus at the very end of the game when there's nothing more for you to do. Thank you. After Bowser's defeat in the main story, you are given a plethora of extra levels in the post-game to conquer, where you soon stumble upon a pleasant surprise. It's Rosalina, if you couldn't tell. And oh my goodness, what a delight she is. In a cast that each flaunts their own identity, Rosa fits in right alongside them. She is a beloved fan favorite for a reason, so she's definitely earned a spot to ball out amongst these all-stars. Daisy bruh moment. And she brings something new to the table with her whole gameplay shtick revolving around her spinning attack, a move ripped straight from her game of origin. This allows her to perform a handy double jump and bat away enemies at the same time. Her drawback is that she's tied with Peach for being an all-around slowpoke. More interestingly, her spinning ability is overridden by any power-ups you pick up. So there's a particular dilemma exclusive to her in deciding if any given power-up is worth losing this special trait over. Overall, she's just pretty darn fantastic. A marvelous example of how 3D World embraces the old, brings it into a modern gameplay style, and still delivers something never before seen. Simply excellent. So, back to Deluxe, I guess. Look, there's really not much left to say, so if you want one last piece of trivia that'll really push you over the hedge and radicalize you, how about they took out the ability to play as your Mii in the last level of Luigi U? Yeah, their one glimmer of relevance is totally and utterly dunked on. I suppose the line of thinking is that you can switch between anyone you want, so the Miis wouldn't be necessary. But remember that Mario isn't playable in New Luigi, and in Deluxe, the Toad Bros are the same character now. So if you're playing with a full party of 4 people, let's just say someone is not having a fun time as Nabbits. You know what? Just forget everything. Forget about those 2 goobers, Toadette and Nabbit, and Rosalina too. The Toad Bros, Peach, and heck, even Luigi. All of these characters can be snapped out of existence, and it wouldn't quite matter. You wanna know why? It's because, regardless of any extra fat that we cut off, we still have the tried and true main course. The slice of white bread that feeds the starving families of the world. The very foundation that allows the Super Series to be accessible to any and everyone who wants to have a good old time exploring through the Mushroom World's various locales. Mr. Mario. Taking a closer look and inspecting a lot of the alternative playable characters over the years has been more of an exercise to see both the triumphs and failures of Nintendo's various implementations of such. Instead of redefining what it means to play a Mario game, they are better categorized as charming accessories that can be latched on and off any given experience without altering much of the baseline formula set by Mario. If done correctly, they make for creative and personalized adjustments to your adventure. If done poorly, then at worst, they are essentially another Mario, which in all actuality ain't so bad. Don't let my past
About an hour
of silly rambling go to waste, as I'll be the first to throw out there's plenty of missed potential spread across the franchise, especially in the new soup department. But if the bottom of the barrel you're giving me is the likes of Green Mario, well, then I suppose I can't get my britches too much in a wad. At least you're not forced to go fishing. Hey!
Thanks for playing.